Tonight we have a very special presentation that paired with the ASCRS Residence Committee as we answer some questions about this year's upcoming fellowship application process. I'm going to let the panel and Dr. Ken introduce himself, and then we'll get to know our panelists, and then we'll get going.
Great, thanks, TVJ. So my name is Brian Can. I'm the vice chair of the Residence Committee for ASCRS. And last year, for the first time, we hosted a live online session. It's sort of a primer for getting ready for the application process and that sort of thing. It was very well received. So we were asked to do it again this year, which we're very happy to do. So what I'll do is I'll just briefly introduce myself and have each of the panelists introduce themselves. And I've got a few just sort of quick sort of nuts and bolts thing to go through, and then we'll open it up to questions. So just so y'all know who I am, again, I'm the vice chair of the ASCRS Residence Committee. I'm the chairman and the program director for the Department of Colorectal Surgery at the Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans. I've been in practice now for almost 20 years, and I've spent 19 of those 20 years as either an associate program director or a program director for both general surgery and colorectal surgery programs. I've been a colorectal program director now for almost 10 years, first at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, now at the Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans. I've had a lot of experience in graduate medical education. I'm an at-large member of the executive board for the Association of Program Directors of Colorectal Surgery, and I'm also on the continuing certification committee for the American Board of Colorectal Surgery. So a lot of experience with training fellows, getting people ready for board certification and that sort of thing. So it's something I really enjoy doing. We'll kind of go around the horn here and have the panelists introduce themselves. We've got a very wide range of people in terms of years of experience and where they are. So I think it'll be a great panel. So why don't we go ahead and start with Ashley?
So my name's Ashley Altoff. I'm a current fellow at Advent Health in Orlando, Florida, and I am staying on as faculty at Advent once I finish my fellowship.
Great. And Allie?
Hi, I'm Allie Geischer. I'm a pediatric and adult colorectal surgeon. I work at Nationwide Children's Hospital and the Ohio State Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, and I've been in practice about 6 years now.
Great. Marco?
I'm Marco Ferrara. I'm the program director at Orlando Health, also in Orlando, Florida. I've been in practice for about 6 years.
All right. And Molly?
Hi, I'm Molly Ford. I'm the program director at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I've been here almost 11 years now, and our program has been ACGME approved for the past 3. So we're about to start our 4th fellow.
And then Scarlett, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm a chief surgical resident at East Carolina University. I'm going to be the colorectal fellow at Beaumont in Royal Oak starting August 1st.
Great. So we have a wide range. We have someone who is going into fellowship, someone finishing fellowship. We have someone who's in practice. We have 3 program directors of varying years of experience. So I think this will be a good wide range of people to talk to. I just want to go over a few things really quickly. I'm just going to share my screen to show you all this. This is just a quick timeline for the application process for this current year. So ERAS opened a few weeks ago. The tokens were distributed for letters of recommendation. So for those of you who are in the current application cycle, hopefully you've already requested your letters of recommendation or in the process of doing that. The applications will be able to be submitted through ERAS on July 3rd. And then they will get released for the program directors to begin reviewing July 17th. Shortly after that is when the interview processes will start. Interviews this year will continue to be virtual, except for one program who has decided they want to go against the norm and do in-person interviews. The match opens on August 7th, and then beginning on September 5th, people will be able to submit their rankings. The program directors, we have to certify our rank list on the 9th, and I think it's the day before the applicants have to submit their final rank list, and then October 23rd is match day. Just want to go over a couple other things here real quickly. The letter of recommendation process here is a little bit different than it has been in years past. So really the easiest way for you guys to kind of get through this is to kind of help direct your program or your letter writers as to what the process is. So there's 2 ways you can access it's called a candidate assessment form. which kind of replaces the like 3-page letter of recommendation that people used to write. In years past, I think I've been program director for almost 20 years, so I've read probably tens of thousands of recommendation letters, and a lot of the letters are just letters that drone on and on and on, and basically just sort of regurgitate your CV, which you already know because we've read your application. So there's certain things as program directors we really want to know about you that your CV doesn't portray. So in the process of trying to extract that information, we've developed a newer way of having people do recommendations. So this assessment form, the easiest way for you to get it to your letter writers is either on the APDCRS website, which I have here. It's apdcrs.org. If you go to the residence tab, first off, if you go to the residency program tab, it lists all of the programs that are currently credited. It lists all the program directors and all of the coordinators. So this is a good source for you to figure out which programs are accredited and which, and that sort of thing. If you go to the residence tab, and the resident assessment application is right here. And then if you scroll down, it goes through the whole process. So you really should make sure your letter writers know this, because this is something new this year. And then basically, if you have them click on the tab here, the colorectal surgery resident assessment application, it opens up the form. And it's a pretty standardized form. You'll see here if it opens. There we go. So it's basically the applicant's name, the reference, what the reference's current position is, how long they've known you, what their connection to you is, rating your professionalism. And then it gets into these different areas of assessment in terms of where you are compared to other applicants they've worked with in the past. And then it asks for what are your strong points, what are your weaknesses, and if there's anything about you that your CV or your application may not have conveyed. What we don't want, again, is that 3-page narrative that talks about what your first pet name was and where you grew up and that sort of, that's just not helpful as a program director. So what we're telling the program directors this year is if you do get this narrative letter in addition to this, to basically to ignore it. Again, we can't make everybody do that, but the intention is we want to try to simplify the process for the program directors. The other thing I want to share with you is the ASCRS website. So if you go to the provider section here under the For Trainees tab, it's a lot of useful information for you here as residents. So one is there's a video that we put together basically outlining the process of how to apply for colorectal surgery training. So this doesn't just cover like what you should be doing like in your 4th year getting ready for the application. This actually goes back to PGY1. So if you decide early on in residency you want to go into colorectal surgery, the things you should be doing over the next 2, 3, 4 years to position yourself to be an attractive or to be a good applicant. Colorectal surgery has become really one of the most competitive fellowships out there. Last year we had, I think, 68 programs, 114 positions, and there were over 150 applicants for those positions. We had 21% of applicants did not match last year. So 1 in 5 applicants is not going to match. That was last year. We're up to, I think, 72 programs this year, and I think closer to 120 positions. But still, that number of applications has gone up every year. So if it continues to go up, we're going to see a similar problem this year. We're just, 1 in 5 people not matching. So you really need to do everything you can to position yourself to be a strong applicant. So this video kind of goes through those steps for you of what to do in terms of getting involved in research and finding mentors and going to meetings and things like that. The other stuff on here, there's also a listing of residency programs here. If you click this tab, it'll show you that. It also has research opportunities. So if you click on this tab here, it'll basically list all of the programs that have research positions available. So if your hospital, or if your general surgery residency program allows you to take a year off to do research, and you want to do that, this is or more. This is a partial listing of the programs that are out there that have programs. I know a lot of places in the past have taken applicants who didn't match, and then they do a research fellowship in hopes of improving their odds of matching the following year. The problem is, as the timelines have shifted, fellowship now starts August 1st instead of July 1st, and the application process, which used to start in July and August, is now starting in June. So by the time you start your research fellowship in July, you've already applied for the following year. So doing that research here really doesn't do a whole lot in terms of helping your application process. But if you have the opportunity to take time off to do research in the middle of your residency, if you get that year off and you're allowed to go somewhere else to do it, this is a partial listing of places that have that available to you to do that. The other stuff that is under these boot camp videos, these are really good videos that the residence committee has put together over the years. These are available to anybody who's an ASCRS member. And these are quick little 10, 15-minute videos. And the initial intention of these was to have something for like new fellows to watch before they start fellowship, just as like sort of a quick nuts and bolts primer about common problems they're going to see in fellowship. You know, how to, you know, GI bleeds, anal emergencies, large bowel obstruction, just sort of a kind of get you through the gate in terms of starting out. So really good information there. And then the last thing is how to join ASCRS as a resident. If anybody on this call is not a member of ASCRS, you should be as a member. I think it costs $25 to join, and you get access to everything on the website. You get access to ASCRSU, which includes the textbook, which includes DCR, which includes just a wealth of videos and webinars and archived talks people have done, and x-rays and question banks and the fundamentals of rectal surgery program. That's all for $25 as a resident. So join now, because when you're attending, it costs a lot more, trust me. All right, so that's all that I have, just sort of as an intro. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and with that, we'll kind of open things up to questions.
All right, I have a few questions from the audience so far. So the first question, since we already talked about how the new kind of letter system, they just wanted to make sure, so even for the chair and PD letter, that it's all on that assessment form as well.
Yes.
And then another question is, I think this is more for the residents and fellows that are on the panel, but what are ways residents can fully evaluate programs given that interviews are virtual?
Yeah, I think probably the interview day is the most informational, and I certainly interviewed for residency when I was in person. So doing interviews in a virtual format was a slightly different walk in the park. But I mean, every program did it differently, but I definitely got a sense of what the program was like, what the people are like, the faculty, and then most of them had at least a separate fellow room or a night before thing with the fellows. And that was very helpful. And honestly, I think the only other in-person thing you miss out on is the building, which I don't think makes a huge difference on where you want to match to be a fellow. So for me, I felt that I really got a good sense of programs, even though it was a virtual interview format. I will say that websites are slightly different. So if you want the inside scoop on each program, you may not necessarily find it on every website. Some are more informational than others.
I would say the resident reception at ASCRS, so shout out for that. That's kind of a nice way to meet like a bunch of program directors, and for us to, you know, meet you in person and put a face to a name. That can be helpful. It's a nice way, because you really realize like how small the society is, and it's kind of nice to meet people in that way too. Yeah,
and we used to do a reception at the college meeting in the fall also, but we're getting away from that beginning this year, just because it I don't know, the cost of it is getting to be prohibitive, and there's not a lot of residents that go to that, I don't think. Ashley, anything from your experience when you applied last year you want to share?
I mean, I'll just echo that. I think talking to the current fellows when you're applying is the most imperative thing. I think when I matched at Advent, like I had talked to the fellows previously that were currently there, and they were very transparent on their experience and kind of what to expect. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to get a feel, and kind of so you don't feel that you're going into something that you don't know. They don't really, at least as a current fellow, like I have no skin in the game. I mean, maybe I do because I'm going to be an attending there, but normally like not so much, you know. They're going to tell you their honest opinion and kind of, you know, what they thought of the program.
Yeah, what we do, we have a video that one of our junior faculty put together, kind of you know, just highlighting, you know, New Orleans itself, the city, you know, the things to do in the city, and then highlighting the program. And then we have each of the faculty does a short little vignette in the video, you know, talking a little bit about themselves, you know, why they chose colorectal surgery, what they like to do outside of medicine, just to get to know us a little bit better. And then we have the current fellows typically do like a quick little 5-minute tour of the hospital. Like you said, Scarlett, you're not going to pick your fellowship based on the physical plan of the hospital, I wouldn't think, but it's still kind of nice to see, like, you know, what your office is going to look like, what the clinic looks like, that sort of thing. Does anybody, I know a lot of programs do like a virtual happy hour, like the night before interviews. Does anybody on the panel have experience with that, or can y'all speak to that? We don't do that.
I think most programs did. Yeah.
I was gonna say Advent does it. This year I will say we weren't the best because we went to a brewery thinking it'd be fun that all the fellows were together and it was showed camaraderie. And it was really loud and it was really hard to for people to hear. But I think our goal in doing that was just to show that we, you know, as a group, we get along great and we love each other and that, you know, we have fun and that we enjoy our fellowship. So
Yeah, we do it the evening before also, so that and you know, when we interview people on the day of, most people echo that it's a really nice experience to talk to the fellows and get, you know, behind the scenes look at how it is and what the day-to-day life is actually like.
So how do y'all do that to sort of operationally? Is it just like an open forum on Zoom where people just ask questions?
I've
Yeah.
never seen it, so I don't know. Maybe it's like a disaster. I don't know.
no, I mean, ours is just a 2-hour like thing where all of us are on Zoom. And this year we all did it in one place on one computer and we just, all of the applicants logged on and they asked us a bunch of questions. We kind of went through, like, because we have so many sites at Advent, all of our sites, kind of what it entails. And then we like kind of opened it up for people to ask questions and what they wanted to know about the program.
Yeah, one year we had, I forget the name of the online platform, but it basically allowed you to move yourself from room to room. So we set up rooms with prior fellows from different years. So the applicants could kind of talk to people from 5 years ago, from 2 years ago, from 1 year ago. And it went pretty well, but then when we tried it the second year and it wasn't as popular. So we've kind of gotten away from that, but it sounds like the people who do it think it really works. The one thing I would say in terms of assessing the programs without being there is just, you know, asking questions as we've heard from the former fellows, but, you know, ask the faculty and get information about like caseloads and things like that. Ask about, have there been case deficiencies in terms of certain categories and things like that. You know, it can be a little bit weird, but asking, you know, are any deficiencies in the program? Like, have you had any RRC citations or anything like that? That's probably maybe not something you want to ask the program director, but maybe ask the coordinator or ask, you know, one of the junior faculty or something like that. Just so you kind of know in your head. You can also find that information on the ACGME website. It has all the programs listed, and if there are any current citations that are active against that program, it will list them and let you know what the status of that is.
I will say that now that everything is virtual, it's, you know, just thinking back to when I applied, there's a ton of new programs. And, you know, when I was applying, it was all in person. You kind of have to strategize and choose, okay, which places am I actually going to want to fly to and take time off of? And, you know, now it's a little bit more free and it's a pro and a con, you know, because you can apply to a lot more places. And I think just sample different, you know, programs and see what you like and what you don't like. Like I have an entire PowerPoint slide that I go through about why Orlando is cool and it's not just Disney and, you know, things about our program and whatnot. And most programs have that. So that's always a good way to kind of do it also, where the website's very helpful too, to see like which programs are out there.
Yeah. Like someone else said earlier, that some of the website information like ours is, I mean, if you open our website, the picture of the departments, we all still have masks on from COVID. So we've asked them like for 2 years now to like update the photo, and like the IT people just haven't gotten around to it. So if it's updated, it's great.
We use a video too in Columbus to just kind of illustrate what the hospital looks like, because we have a new cancer hospital and kind of what our resources are for patients and what the facilities look like, but also because most people may not be familiar with Columbus, Ohio, or have been there before. And so we want to express that it's a really great city. So part of it kind of talks about how great the city is too. And I think that helps. But I think in some respects, not visiting a smaller city like Columbus in person can hurt us a bit because people, when they do come, are surprised by what a great city it is, how clean it is, and how livable it is, and how many great things it does have to offer. That's one of the things that we've heard from our fellows who've gone through virtually in comparison to our fellows who've been in person. So, but most of the time they say it's 1 year, so just the same, that's not a big factor.
One more question about the letters. For people that might have already uploaded them and didn't use that format, should they redo it with the assessment form?
Yeah, that's probably the best idea, is to go back to the
Okay.
letter writer and ask them to just sort of, I mean, if they've already written a letter, they can cut and paste, whatever they need to into that form.
Right.
But, and again, this is, last year we used a version of this form. Plus we allowed, narratives in addition to the form. This is the first year we're kind of trying to get away from the written narratives, just to make the process easier for the program directors, so we don't have to read as many long letters and that sort of thing, and really get the information we actually need. So if they can do that, that would be helpful.
It makes it a lot easier for
And-
us, because I mean, otherwise you kind of comb through these old letters trying to get like a nugget of originality, say, what are they actually trying to say about this applicant? I know that they went to this college and did all this, so it makes it nice. And I just filled out 2 letters of recommendation today. They're very quick, and I think the attendings will probably like it, honestly, because it's more to the point.
It makes it a lot easier for the letter writer, actually. It really does. I've been doing this a long time, and there's certain people I know, like when I get to their letter, I can just skip to the last paragraph. I don't even have to read like the first 2.5 pages of it, because it's just going to be fluff. I can just go right to the last paragraph. But this kind of gets away from that process. It makes it more streamlined and easier, both for the letter writer and the letter reader.
Okay, a couple questions regarding candidates that might not be US citizens. So the first question is, will programs understand if we leave the ABSITE component unfulfilled? This is for a Canadian resident that's applying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, they have some sort of in training exam, I believe, in
There is an
Canada.
exam. I can speak to that just a little bit. And
Yeah.
obviously the question writer might know this more than I do if they are Canadian, but our fellow that we match for August, he is Canadian. And so they do have some standardized scores that are comparable to other Canadians, obviously not to the US scoring system. So I think you do have to look at the application from a little bit of a different perspective, but any program that accepts J1 visas should have kind of a system for evaluating folks without ABSITEs. So I think it definitely does factor into it, that again, not everybody is graded on the same scale, but I think again, most of us that accept J1 visas are pretty open to trying to review applications with a fair eye.
And is there a kind of centralized location for where programs that accept visas, or like what programs, what visas they provide, does that exist somewhere? Or is it kind of just on the candidate to talk to the programs that they're applying to and see what kind of visas they offer?
I don't think there is a standardized way of knowing. We actually talked about this at the last program directors meeting, seeing if there was a way for the ACGME to indicate on the listing of programs which programs accepted J1 visas, and they
Gotcha.
were very resistant to that. With understanding that might change from year to year, or I don't know if they were, there's afraid there's going to be some legal liability on their part about that or whatever. So really it's up to the applicant to find out right now. And it really is important, because a lot of programs don't sponsor visas. I mean, for instance, Oxnard we don't sponsor visas for fellowship program. We do for residencies, but not for fellowship programs. So people should know that, so they're not wasting their time applying to programs they can never get into. Yeah, the other issue with the scores is, I know like with USMLE going to like pass fail, I mean, I don't know how many of us use USMLE scores as filters for fellowship. I mean, I don't, but there's talk about doing something similar with ABSITE scores going forward, in terms of having it be a percentile, having it being a straight percentage, or a quartile or quintile type score, or something like that. So that's just something for us to keep in mind as program directors, or people who are going to be reviewing applications going forward.
And then another question, on that reference form where they have the different percentile rankings kind of broken down, do you feel like all of the letter writers are just putting like top 5% I've ever worked with and it kind of becomes irrelevant? Or do you think it's more meaningful?
Yeah, I'll speak to that given that I'm on the committee that's in the process of revamping this whole letter writing thing going forward. So yeah, well, we do think that's a problem. So we're in the process right now of developing a new candidate assessment form for next year, which will actually ask the letter writer. It's going to list a bunch of different areas of competencies, and it's not like the ACGME competencies. It's like real life competencies. And there's going to be like 3 that they have to assess, and then they're going to pick 3 more from the other list of 6 or 8 or however many are left. And so it's going to be very specific descriptions of how that applicant exemplifies that competency. So it's getting away from that top 5 to 10%, because whoever asked the question is dead on. I mean, every letter writer, they knows if they don't rank their applicant in the top 5%, they're putting them at a disadvantage.
Right.
You know, you'll get someone who's, you know, their app site scores are in single digit, you know, numbers, and, you know, they've had the repeat rotations or repeat a year, and it says they're like in the top 5% of residents that are trained. Or you'll get 3 applicants from the same program in the same year that says this is the best resident I've ever trained.
Yeah.
And we know, well, if you've got 3 people you're saying that for, something doesn't jive up. So, so yeah, it is a little bit artificial, I think. But at the same time, right now it's the best that we have. It really, in my mind, it's more than what's written in below that in terms of what the strengths and weaknesses and that sort of thing are, and where the applicant applies in that range.
They did change, I think, from last year to this year, because they used to have an actual question like, where would you rank this applicant, number 1,
Right.
number 2 to 5? That's gone, which is good, because you're right. Anything, and I remember last year there were 3 people
Yeah.
from the same program, each one from the same letter writer said number 1. You're like, all right,
Yeah.
well, this is kind of worthless. But yeah,
It's
I mean,
like
I
picking
think
your
that,
favorite child.
yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, I get it. But yeah, I think that they tried to move away from all these things that don't mean anything, right? Even I think we discussed maybe getting rid of like, what is this applicant's weakness? Because a lot of times they're like, they care too much, or, you know, they're too good at all these things and things. So we try to, you know, like boil it down to what things actually are helpful to us, especially since we're not meeting applicants too. I mean, that's like a big thing too. Sometimes it's hard to assess some of these things just via Zoom call.
And then there was one question about the deadlines mentioned on ERAS. I know we put up a timeline for the application cycle a little bit or at the beginning of the talk, so maybe we could put that up again and that would answer that question.
Yes.
But another resident was asking, do any interviews happen after October 9th when the rank list certification starts?
Yeah, so I mean, the programs have to submit their rank list. The program directors, we have to certify our rank list by October 9th. So there really would not be any point in doing interviews after that. You know, unless you don't match. We usually find out a couple days before match day if we haven't matched, which in colorectal surgery like hardly ever happens. I mean, the fill rate is like over 99%, you know, across the board. I think 2 years ago, one position didn't fill through the match, but it was filled very quickly outside the match. So it's really not an issue. So there's really no point in interviewing after that. The reality of things is for our program, at least, we try to have our interviews done at least a couple weeks before when we have to have the rank list certified, because we will do all our interviews and then we'll meet as a department, kind of go through all the applications, review things again, sort of, you know, go through the PowerPoint of everybody's mug shots and kind of figure out, you know, where we want our order to be and kind of go from there. We usually have that done at least our own internal meeting at least a week or 2 before the list has to be certified. So most of your interviews are going to be happening, you know, probably in August and September and early October.
Okay, and then are there any questions that recent applicants wish they had asked to better assess the program? And then to the program directors, are there any questions that you feel like we should have been asking that we didn't?
Well, Ashley and Scarlett, do you guys want to tackle that from your end of things?
I feel like I don't know if there's anything I didn't ask. I feel like the most important thing is just asking the fellows, like, how they like it and, you know, what they would change. And I think you'll get a lot based off of that. Like if they start giving you a laundry list of all the things that are wrong with the program, then it's probably not a great program. But if, you know, there's very little that they would change, or if it's or things that just don't matter to you, I think that that's a good question just to kind of understand. And, you know, looking at, you know, how busy the program is and what kind of case variety you're going to get. I think that's ultimately what's going to give you the best experience.
And I also would say, I think it's important to figure out what you want out of your fellowship too. So if you're someone that wants to do advanced endoscopy or pelvic floor or some of these things that maybe not all programs have as robust of a training in, that you ask these questions, because this is kind of the first time where you get to, like, it's less of a please pick me and more of a like, oh, I have a say in like where I'm going to go. So I think it's really important to take those things into consideration.
I guess, you know, Marco and Molly, are there questions that you feel like people don't ask that they should ask?
I always talk about how I think it's this is my biased view, but, you know, having a program where for people who this is important to, having like multiple fellows, I think it's a nice thing. You know, just kind of having a group, especially nowadays that applicants don't meet each other. And so it's kind of a nice, like I still talk to most of the people my same year that I interviewed with. That's something that I think is maybe one of those intangibles that can be important, and something that I always talk about as like a positive. And then, you know, everybody's different, right? I mean, you have to be kind of able to assess your own program, like as a program director, what are our strengths, where are our weaknesses? If somebody comes in and has certain goals or aspirations, like I try to be honest with people and say, listen, you know, if this is what you're looking for, you know, I'm very proud of our program and we're very good at doing these things. And, but, you know, that doesn't always fit what everybody's looking for in terms of a fellowship. So I think being honest with that also is important.
And I agree also with what Stevie J was saying is it's very important to ask about the things that are important to you as an applicant. And so figuring out, you know, is the program's goal only to train future program directors and chair people? And if that's the case, and that's not your interest, then that's not the right program for you. And it's okay to ask those questions of, you know, what do you generally expect your fellows to do afterwards, or what are your fellows doing afterwards? I think that's a good, sometimes it's available on the website, sometimes it's not. You know, I think looking at patterns and trying to decide, okay, if this program has only trained, again, you know, the future ASCRS presidents, and I want to be a private practice colorectal surgeon, which is great, and have no academic interest, that's a great aspiration, but maybe that, again, that's not the right program for you. So figuring out what you want is helpful. And sometimes you don't know until you're in a program. So then you want a good general education. Figuring out sometimes the dynamic with the general surgery residents is helpful too. And again, just wording it in a manner that it just opens up the discussion. Sometimes people are open about it in their initial introduction, and sometimes people aren't. But, you know, figuring out what your relationship with others will be. Many programs don't have a second fellow. And so again, you'll be working more closely with the general surgery residents and getting a sense of what that dynamic is, because that can often make or break you for your year. If it's a, you know, kind of an open accepting program that will work with you versus any sort of animosity. And again, you have to figure out how you frame that question. But again, I think the biggest thing is just figuring out what you want or what you're looking for, and then how to frame questions to decide whether or not the program is something that you actually are looking for.
I think it's also good to be honest with that, and then not to be like a chameleon. We're like, okay, if I'm going to a place that's more academic, I'm going to say that my interest is academic surgery. If I'm at a place that's this, now my interest is community, rural colorectal surgery. You just know what you want to do. And again, like you said, some people don't know that until they start fellowship, because people come in with varying levels of experience in colorectal surgery. It's really interesting, honestly, how little colorectal surgery some people have done going into fellowship application, like relatively so. A lot of people discover that on their way.
I think it's also important to ask what questions, as far as what is your kind of day-to-day life going to be like? Are you going to be taking call in the ER every night, or how often, what kind of scut work kind of is going to be done, and what are the other members of the team? Are you going to be in the ER every night with a uncomplicated diverticulitis admission? I think sometimes those may be hard questions to ask. You might feel uncomfortable asking them, but it is important to know what your day-to-day life is going to kind of look like, and make sure you really just have a true understanding of what that looks like at that particular program. Because I know sometimes the participants may go into that situation, they may not be fully aware of what that looks like, and then they may be pretty dissatisfied of that year, what I've heard from some of my my colleagues.
Yeah, if the program director doesn't want to, or the faculty doesn't want to be honest with you about that kind of stuff, that's a big red flag. Because it doesn't do us any good as program directors to sell the applicants a false bill of goods and then have them show up and things aren't what they expected them to be. That means they're unhappy. It's not going to be a good year. But the one question too, I'm always kind of I don't know, amazed. I'm kind of surprised people don't ask often is like, how do we handle sort of progression of graded autonomy in the operating room? You know, a lot of people just assume that they're going to show up and, you know, that the process is going to play out somehow. But like a lot of places will have a process. At what point do you move on to doing the next part of the operation by yourself, or do the whole operation by yourself with us watching? And how do we handle that graded autonomy? And the progression of that. No one really seems to want to ask that. Maybe it's just an uncomfortable question, but I think it's important for people to know. Because I know there are programs where the fellows, you know, they might not operate as much as other programs where they retract or hold the camera and that sort of thing, which is really not good for training. So you can get that sense from talking to the current fellows, obviously. And they don't have any skin in the game. It's not, them lying doesn't do them any good. So they should be pretty honest with you about that. One other thing Marco talked about earlier, which I think is important, is with interviews virtually now and not meeting your quote unquote classmates. Same thing. Like I interviewed 21 years ago, and some of my best friends in colorectal surgery are people that I met on the interview trail. You know, where we'd fly from city to city together. We'd stay in the same hotels together. We got to eat together on the interview trail. And you guys, the current, you know, classes of applicants doing this virtually don't have that opportunity. I mean, a lot of them don't even meet and you can probably speak to this, Ashley, not meeting your co-fellows until you go to meetings together, or you go to the career course, or you go to the SCRS meeting, the robotics course. So it puts you at a little bit of a disadvantage. So what we do at our program is at the beginning of our virtual interview sessions, we have each of the applicants do like a 5 or 6 minute talk about something non-medical to help, you know, us get to know them, but also so the other applicants on that interview day get to know them as well a little bit. And we've had people come back and tell us how they really love that. They remember somebody talked about such and such, and when they met them at a meeting somewhere, they remembered them from talking about that. So it kind of helps to put you know, some sort of memory to the name and the face. So.
No, it's very true. It's different than all my mentors had described in terms of how close they were. But I will say that there was people I interviewed time and time again with, and I keep in contact with those people, and we eventually did get to meet each other. I mean, Stevie J and I had almost every interview together. So it's harder, and your circle is smaller, but it's still possible. And I will just say, like, when you go through this process, like, lean on the people that are doing it with you, talk to them, ask them what they thought, like, even if it's maybe not going to influence your opinion. If something was really weird, like, you can come on, talk about that, you know. But yeah, use the people that are around you.
And I do want to say, for all of the applicants that are on here now, like, utilize that WhatsApp. And I like a quick shout out, just I'm at a single fellow program, and I honestly wanted that. But we have like our own separate group chat. So where all the people at these only fellow programs, which like 30 or 40 of us, have like a place to commiserate if we want to. And we try to arrange meetups at all the meetings too. So like there is a way to like a good job within our class to building that community when we weren't able to really meet each other on the trail.
That video I showed earlier about the so on the ASCRS website, on the resident section about how to apply, there's a little blurb in there about the pluses and minuses of single fellow versus multiple fellow programs. So If you're not sure, look at that because there are some nuances to being a single fellow program versus a multiple fellow program that you may not think about. So look at that and use that to your advantage as well.
And then another question from the audience. Is there any benefit for applicants to submit applications by July 3rd versus July 17th?
Probably, I don't know. Probably every program is different, but probably not. I think probably most of the time we just get all the applications and we just kind of look at them. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, the application, they open to us on July 17th. But having said that, a lot of time stuff kind of trickling. So actually usually wait a week or so beyond that to start reviewing applications. I have to like flag, you know, the 30 incomplete applications and have to come back to them again 2 weeks later. So I'll wait a week, honestly. 'Cause we usually don't do our first round of interviews till like late August to begin with anyway. So you know, it's just a huge advantage to doing it early, other than getting it off your plate. And if you get the other thing is you got to stay on your letter writers. You know, and that's in that video too. Ask them early and ask them often and ask them frequently. And if you need to send them daily emails, harass them, do whatever you got to do to get them to get that letter written for you, because we do every year. There's a couple applications where somebody has asked somebody to write a letter, and we're getting close, you know, having to make a decision about have all their letters in. So unfortunately, people aren't going to get interviewed to have all their letters in. So stay on your letter writers.
Yeah, I think you know, every program has kind of different views on your kind of applications or due timeline, but we publish ours on our website of when our applications are due. And after that point, even though that's not when applications have closed, at that point, if we have any incompletes, we'll just delete them from consideration. So agree that as quickly as you can get everything complete, the better it's going to be for you.
Yeah, Scarlett, do you want to talk about what you posted in the chat there?
I have no idea of the verity of the statement, but my mentor had said there are some programs that only review the first whatever number of applications that receive. So even if a bajillion people hit submit as soon as it opened, like there's a computerized ranking of who got in first. So I guess from that perspective, if you're applying to one of those programs, not that I know which one, it may be worthwhile to get in earlier than later.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that. We don't do that at our program. I think like if you do that, you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage unless your goal is just to get through the application process and get whoever you get and not worry about it. But I mean, we want to get the best applicants out there. And if it means somebody is a good applicant, but their letter writer hasn't written their letter yet, it's not their fault. It's their letter writer's fault. So I don't want to punish them for that. I mean, I'm looking to get the best applicants in my interview schedule I can get and the best fellows I can get. So if that means having to wait a little bit, I'll wait a little bit.
Another question, kind of about the logistics of the application. So right now there are many programs that are listed as unregistered for the match. Is that something that the programs are supposed to do on their end by the time the application opens?
Yeah, so we have to, as program directors, we have to register for the match. So most of the programs that are not registered probably just haven't done it yet. Now, every year there are a few programs that decide not to enter the match. So maybe they have an internal applicant who they decide they're going to, so they may not be in the match. They may decide to not be in the match that year if it's a single fellow program. So the only real way to know that, I guess, would be to contact the program directly if they're listed as being unregistered, if it's a place that you're really interested in.
And I don't have any others in any of the chats I have going on right now.
I have a question.
I had seen that last year when it was getting pretty close and there were still quite a few programs unregistered. And then like right before applications open, like suddenly all these programs are registered. So I think they just have to wait.
Most of the time it's just, you know, the program director or the coordinator just hasn't, you know, they've ignored you get emails every day about this from the match and from AAMC about registering. So a lot of ignoring the emails and waiting a second.
I have a question. What would you advise for the program directors to somebody who doesn't match, what they can do in the intervening year if they want to still apply? Like, what do you typically tell people their viable options to do?
Again, the researcher, but nowadays the researcher doesn't really help you for the following year. So, you know, what I usually tell people is talk to your mentors about why it is you feel that you didn't match. So what was the weakness on your application? You know, in terms of what you spend that year doing, you know, again, maybe doing the research here and then the following year, maybe doing some work as a locum tenens for the year and re-entering the match the following year might be a good idea for some people. But really kind of identifying what your weaknesses were and identifying ways that you can sort of remedy those weaknesses and try to make yourself a stronger applicant for the following year.
I think one of the things that also builds strength, and again, it suffers a little bit from the timeline, but doing one of the potentially unaccredited or un-ACGME accredited colorectal kind of years, fellowship, kind of junior staff years, and I think most of those that are already established have a pretty good reputation of when someone has completed that, they're like kind of almost ready to be a super fellow or at least a real solid fellow because they've had a lot more kind of designated colorectal or robotic experience under their belt, or doing a fellowship like minimally invasive or something along those lines might also kind of add to the idea that, okay, well, they'll complete this in a year. And even though they don't have, you know, most of it under their belt yet, you know, this is going to make them stronger when they come to the program.
Yeah, the unaccredited fellowships definitely can be a big plus, especially if you do you're at a place where they have both the accredited and the unaccredited fellowship. So it's kind of almost like an audition year. You go for the unaccredited year and you perform really well, and they see what you can do. It might be more likely to match into the program the following year. Marco, Molly, you want to take that? I can give our process at the end.
Ours is pretty basic. We do kind of a group introduction and kind of a very brief get to know you, and then we break out into different rooms. We do have individual rooms, but we also have rooms where you'll meet with 2 faculty at a time. That is actually, we kind of tested it out a couple of years ago, and it ended up working better than we expected, at least from the feedback that we've gotten. But that also then limits your interview time from, you know, meeting in 10 rooms to now meeting in 6 rooms. And so that's helpful as well. And then you end up getting about an hour and a half of room time with the fellow, which you can also use to, you know, eat your breakfast or whatever, but you have the option to engage the fellow in any questions. And we also have we have the current fellow and then the last year's fellow that are in that room.
Yeah, we have the night before, we usually do a happy hour, so to speak, where they can speak to the fellows. And they are, then the day of, I kind of start with a spiel that I go through, like a PowerPoint presentation. And there's kind of like a random room, not a random room, but like a common room where our program coordinator, who's been there for like 45 years, is there and can talk to all the fellows. And then they break out into rooms with us. And sometimes it's one-on-one. And some rooms will have more than one person also. And usually we do about 8 to 10 minutes per interview.
Yeah, ours is pretty similar. We start out with again the video that one of our faculty has made about what life is like in New Orleans and all the great things about the city, and then talks a little bit about the hospital itself, and then we show the virtual tour of the hospital from the current fellows. Then I will get on and in real time sort of do a PowerPoint about the program itself. I talk a little bit about and we're one of the oldest programs in the country, so I'll talk about the history of our program a little bit and that sort of thing. Talk about, you know, where I've got a whole listing of our last 15 years worth of fellows, like where they go after fellowship, that sort of thing. I show our case log so they see where if we have deficiencies, where they are. Talk about, you know, rotation schedules, coverage, things like that. And then we do the same thing as what Molly and Marco described. We have sort of a common room that everybody sits into, and then the coordinator moves them into the individual rooms for each individual interview. We do individual interviews with each of the faculty, so depending on who's available, it's usually 7 to 8 interviews, and it's usually about 10 minutes an interview. And then the current fellows are in that common room with people who aren't doing interviews to be able to ask questions and that sort of thing as well. So I think most places do pretty similar. Whether you do it's individual interviews or tandem, some places actually still do like a group interview or it's multiple faculty at once. That's probably going to be the only real variation, I think.
I will say we do a big group interview. So I think we have like three or four rooms, but there's up to like, I remember when I interviewed at Advent, we had like 8 people in one room at one point.
How was that?
That's how mine was in person though. It's like a boardroom meeting.
I mean, it was interesting. It was fine though. Like you kind of got to see the dynamics among the group, which I mean, Advent is a large group. I think there's a lot of us. So I think it was nice to see that standpoint, you know, just kind of how they all interact. Because ultimately, like you can ask all the questions and they're very cookie cutter questions. But I think ultimately your goal is, are you going to work with these people? Are you going to get what you want that year? And, you know, ultimately, are you going to have fun and, you know, enjoy your year? So.
I think another important thing to ask is like, because there are so many things throughout the year, like the career course, and there's, you know, the APDCRS robot training courses. It's always an important thing, I think, to ask about, you know, do the fellows get to do things like that? You know, because like was alluded to earlier, sometimes that is really where you meet your co-fellows also, and it's a great way to, you know, kind of communicate and to, you know, see how everybody else is doing. So that's an important question to ask too.
Yeah, and Ashley brought up a good
Uh,
point, something that I hadn't thought of until she said it. For the people in the application process, try to get a sense of how the staff interact with each other, which is very hard to do virtually. And that's, I think, one of the advantages of what we do with our little intro session at the, where everybody gives a little talk. Like in between the talks, the faculty were on there kind of bantering with each other, and you know, we might, you know, make a comment about something, how it applies to somebody else, and make fun of them about it. So they kind of see a lot of the back and forth and interaction between the faculty during that process as well. We've had multiple applicants tell appreciate it, be able to see how they do with each other, because it's hard to do virtually.
I have a few more questions that are coming in here last minute. The first one is there a minimum or maximum number of letters recommended?
I believe the minimum is 3. Generally, you're going to want one from your current chair and one from your current program director, and then one from a colorectal faculty. You know, I think having 4 is not a disadvantage, you know, but I think anything more than that is probably overkill. Any less than 3 though is probably not going to be sufficient.
I think it's
And then
the same thing. And I think personally for me, the most important ones are program director, because those are people who have known you from 5 to 7 years. They've seen you grow as an adult. You know, they take you as a, you know, just having been to our general surgery graduation, I'm so reminded of this, you know, you're coming out of medical school where you're kind of worthless as a physician, and then they see you grow into, you know, a competent surgeon. It's a beautiful thing. So they know you very well. They're very proud of you typically, and write you a nice letter. And then I think, you know, having colorectal faculty also is very important, because, you know, I feel like I can really trust what this person says. Sometimes we get letters from, you know, people who are not colorectal, and that's fine too, especially if they know you well, if you've done a lot of research with them. But I know personally those are the ones that I kind of pay a lot of attention to.
And how much does interest in a program matter? So I think what this question's getting at is, if, like, let's say I emailed like a program and was like, hey, just want to let you know you're in my top 3 or something like that. Do you guys take that into consideration at all?
Sure. I think I do still think that as old-fashioned as it is, some sort of thank you or just follow up after the interview, if you enjoyed it, if you truly think it's a program that you might be interested in ranking. I think somehow expressing like, hey, I enjoyed this a lot, like I could see myself succeeding at your program, blah blah blah. I think touching base is nice. For us, if you tell us you're going to rank us number 1, it doesn't change our rank list. But I think that kind of note of appreciation and interest is helpful. But again, the I'm ranking you high doesn't really matter when we were making our rank list.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, it's hard. It's one of the things we talked about at the program director meeting, is now that you can apply basically infinitely and you don't have to fly to a place, it's kind of hard sometimes to determine, okay, is this person actually interested in coming to our program or not? And so there was even discussion of, okay, should we give people a certain amount of tokens? You're like, okay, but you're like really my favorite, and I have 8 of these to give. And I don't know that I'm in favor of that, but I agree with what Molly said. You know, having some communication, I don't know, it just seems like a courteous thing to do. And especially if you're particularly interested in, because we live in an era where you can directly engage with program director, faculty, or whatnot. And even if you don't match there, sometimes you can make nice mentor-mentee relationships that way. I think it's a very kind of a nice way to do that.
What I tell
And
people too is if, you know, it doesn't, you know, it's nice for us to know, like, if you, when you get done all your interviews and you've got your top 2 or 3 programs, it certainly doesn't hurt to have your mentors reach out to the program directors of those places to tell them that you're really interested. But what I warn people is don't have them like call 15 programs, because the program directors, we all talk to each other. And we know what's going on. So if, you know, you have your mentor call 10 programs and tell them all that you're not their number one, we're going to figure that pretty quickly, and it's not going to look good. So, yeah, have your mentors reach out to your top couple programs. I mean, if we've got 2 people who are kind of neck to neck, and I know that one person has a little bit more of an implied interest, it may sway me a little bit more in that direction.
And then I think this is a good last question as we're nearing the end of our time here. But would the program directors in the group mind talking about what they look for in a fellow?
You want to start, Margo?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like people ask it every year too. I think that we mostly want a well-rounded individual, somebody who can work well in a team, someone who has shown interest in a maturity level for wanting to spend a focused year of learning about a very multifaceted specialty, right? I mean, we kind of alluded to, we do a lot of complex cancer work, we do IBD, we do pelvic floor, there's basic anal rectal stuff. There's a lot of things that we teach in this 1-year fellowship. And so, you know, we just want to make sure we have somebody who seems like they can work together in a team, has a good, you know, respect for the field, I guess, and who I guess will be proud to call, you know, colleagues when they're done.
And I agree with that. I think, you know, we're looking for, in the application process, we're looking for someone who's smart, you know, well-read, researched, and liked by others. And then ultimately, if you make it to the interview process, you're looking for someone who's well-liked by you, because you're going to want to, you know, interact with them, work with them. I mean, your fellow is like your adopted child. And, you know, we have one fellow a year at Vanderbilt, and literally at the end, like, I feel like, wow, like, we're sending our child off into the world to you know, make it a better place for the colon, the rectum, and the anus. And so, you know, it's definitely a very personal relationship that you gain through that year of training. And so finding someone that you feel like you can work well with is a big deal for the interview process.
And I also say it's incredible, some of the stories of the applicants who come through. It is like just a humbling thing sometimes to read about the life story of some of the people who are applying, especially people who have trained in other countries and the things that they've gone through. It's kind of it's difficult. I'm sure Molly and Brian would say the same thing. You know, you have all these, I mean, a lot of great applicants, and you're trying to choose, you know, okay, how do we rank these people? This person's story was incredible, and this person is this. It's, you know, I feel like every year I'm just floored by the quality of applicants and the diversity of stories and backgrounds that comes through. It's really nice.
Allie, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree that we get asked that question all the time, and ultimately I want someone that I can trust my patients with. And when they call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be able to trust their assessment. And sometimes you really, even though it's Zoom, you can get a good sense of that from people. You can see who's clicking, who's getting along well with the group. We want someone who's going to work well with the residents, someone who's going to work well with the nurse practitioners, someone that we're not going to have these constant issues with throughout the year. It's 1 year, and we don't want to be focusing on personality conflicts. We want to be focusing on making the fellow the you know, ultimate surgeon that they can be from that 1 year that goes by so fast, and there's so much to learn. And I think it's just finding that good fit ultimately.
Yeah, it's 1 year, but it's a very intimate year, especially if you're a 1 or 2 fellow. I mean, you're going to get to know your faculty, and they're going to get to know you very, very, very well. So it's got to be someone who you can get along with for the year. It's got to be a team player, somebody who is receptive to feedback. You know, if you've got someone who thinks they know what coming in on day, going to be a problem. You know, you need to be receptive to feedback. You need to realize you got a lot to learn as a fellow, and you've only got a year to learn it. So you need to be a sponge and just soak it all up. And for me as a program director, those are the more important things. But also, like somebody said earlier, like my patients in the ICU sick at 3 o'clock in the morning. I need to know the person on the other end of the phone knows what they're doing in terms of assessing them and taking care of them. I need to know that someone who can operate. I mean, if we're doing a tough pelvic case and we get into bleeding, we're going to be able to get out of trouble together, that sort of thing. So, when I read letters, when I see someone set another program, so this is someone I would love to train at my program or someone I would trust to operate on my own family member, that's like the big, shining star in the letter recommendation, and it makes me look at that a little bit closer. So.
All right, it is 7. Well, I guess 7 o'clock for me, 8 o'clock for East Coast. But I want to thank everybody for their time tonight. We really appreciate all of you being here, and hopefully we got all the questions answered. If there's more, feel free to reach out, and we can always maybe like contact the resident committee if there's anything that's kind of left outstanding. But again, we really, really appreciate your time. I know, especially the fellows too, as we're nearing the end here. And good luck everybody with this year's application cycle. With that, have a wonderful Sunday. And if there's any other parting words, we'll take them now.
First, I want to thank CRS Virtual Ed for, sponsoring this for us. We really appreciate that opportunity. And I want to thank our panelists for giving up an hour of their Sunday evening to do this. Much appreciated.